Hey, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending today's Q&A session. This webinar will be recorded and it's posted to the Code Adoption Toolkit in a week's time about. If there are any issues with audio, please feel free to write me in the chat. My name is Erica DeLello and I'm a project manager for Noresco. This series has been sponsored by the Colorado Energy Office, and I don't think we have specific training materials today, but we've got two folks from Subcommittee Associates who will be running us through a couple of questions. And if you guys have any questions as well, we're trying to encourage more of a discussion here. So this is actually the last training in our webinar series for the Colorado Energy Office. That said, we will likely be picking up this series in just a couple months' time. And I know that Excel Energy is also still providing webinars. So I don't know if you have that registration link on hand and would be willing to post that in the chat, but I know that they're filling in that gap and have a few webinars every month ongoing. So just a couple of other items. Of course, we are always offering technical assistance to jurisdictions, whether or not you need help with a plan reviews or adopting the code or anything like that. We're here to help you guys. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any interest in working with us on updating your codes. So most of you also know probably about the Code Adoption Toolkit, but there's a bunch of resources on there. We're actually going through an update currently to put some of the new links in there because some of them are broken. So bear with us a little bit over the next couple of days as we get that updated. But I do want to highlight today the helpline, which is our latest resource available for you all, and it's available to anyone in Colorado on any of the I codes. So not just IECC, you can ask about IBC, IPC, IMC, any stretch codes, even reach codes. So for example, if you're a jurisdiction and need assistance on a plan review or a homeowner or engineer with a question about code applicability, you can submit a ticket and then the subject matter expert will get back to you in just a couple days time. You can access this helpline through the Code Adoption Toolkit. You can see up here, it is linked. And yeah, I think that pretty much wraps that up. So for this Q&A session, please use the Q&A function, or you can even raise your hand and ask Glenn or Hope directly the question. I'll unmute you, and then we'll go from there. Lastly, there's that lovely survey window that pops up following the webinar. Please take a minute to provide that feedback so we can continue to improve. So just a quick intro to our presenters and the folks that will be answering your questions today is Gil Rossmiller. He's been in the construction industry for over 40 years. He's worked on various different committees for the development of IRC, IMC, IPC, and IECC. And Hope Medina is also on the line, and she also works for Subcommittee Associates and has been involved in as a governing member of the ICC Sustainability Membership Council, Consensus Member Committee, and Task Group Chair of the National Green Building Standard for several code cycles now. So they are a wealth of knowledge. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in now. If we don't have any questions yet, I can kick us off here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
This is your opportunity, right? Here we are for the next hour, just waiting for you to stump us, and it wouldn't be difficult to do. All right, here we are.
We ask that you pick our brain and not our nose, but it's a great opportunity to pick our brain. Come on.
Yeah. Nice, very nice. That's
Any of
hilarious.
those burning questions. This is the opportunity. So since I don't see any raised hands or anything in the Q&A, I'll start us off, and if we get some, then we can go ahead and jump over to those. But these are a few questions that we received through the helpline. And so I'm gonna tee them up for Hope and Gil to respond to. But first one up is about her certificates. And when you get the HER certificate in for plan review, do they need to provide a reference design and a reference checklist?
Oh, yes, yeah, positively. Air tightness testing, yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. Perfect. So I think it's especially important, especially when we're dealing with the residential piece of it, because now, now that ResCheck has finally caught up with us, that slab on grade insulation is required. Okay. It's not something that it's required prescriptively, and it's also, you can't trade it off. It's not trade off. You can't do that in ResCheck. If anybody's done that ResCheck recently, remember, you got that great big red statement that comes up and says, hey, you can't trade this off anymore. Okay. It's kind of up in the air of whether or not you can do it in performance, the performance path. I personally have been allowing it, but I make certain that if they want to trade off the slab on grade insulation, typically for walkouts, right, like a walkout basement, they don't want to have to put the insulation there typically. You know, it has to come to the top of the slab, and they avoid that like the plague. Your reference house, which is the code house, should show that it has slab on grade insulation. And the house as built, or the proposed home, should show no slab on grade insulation. So that's kind of the piece of needing to see the as proposed house, the house that they're going to build, and the reference house. And you're looking at all the different insulation. So the insulation values in the reference house, it's a right down the letter of the code. That's exactly what it is, and that's what the software is comparing it to. So that's one thing I've been kind of pushing folks that I've done the last couple of performance reviews on it. They need to do that. And it's not, the raters aren't necessarily used to doing that. It takes a moment or two for them to make the realizations like, oh yeah, got it.
Question, Erica, was the question about the report for the performance report or ResCheck?
All right. Oh, I thought it was performance.
Yeah, but you mentioned ResCheck, and there's like the specific section for performance that talks about you know, what needs to be provided, and then there's that additional information which does state a code official can ask for the reference design that was utilized for it. So I just was curious if we were talking ResCheck or if we were talking performance.
I was talking performance.
No, I don't have that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were as clear as mud on this.
Appreciate that.
You did an excellent job.
Thanks.
All right, well, we've got a couple other questions now in the chat and in the Q&A. First, the one that came in is, can you elaborate on air tightness testing procedures for multifamily and commercial buildings?
So it does depend on which code edition that you're under, right? So if we're talking, and it also depends on when you say multifamily, are you 3 stories or less, or are you 4 stories or more? Because if you're 3 stories or less, you're looking at that, you're going to be following those provisions on the residential side. So you're doing blower door tests. Now in the 18, I believe the 18 did allow for sampling, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
but that was
wanting
removed
20.
out of the 21.
Yeah, he's wanting the 21s.
Oh, okay. Well, you're in for a world of great information. In the 21, there's a nice new metric that came in for 3 stories or less. And with that metric, it allows for the CFM per square foot as opposed to the air changes per hour, which benefits those smaller volumed spaces. So it actually is, I think, a little bit more obtainable when it comes to doing blower door tests for those individual apartments that don't have that massive amount of volume that you're going to see typically with a single family home. So there is some understanding with that. Now, when we start talking about commercial buildings overall, and then again, it would include multifamily that's 4 stories or more. Prior to the 2021, there was always that option that you could do a quote unquote blower door test. You could go prescriptive where you utilize the materials or assembly approach, and then you had to seal all your joints and seams and penetrations and all these prescriptive options, or you could have done the blower door testing. And to be able to pass the blower door testing, you were going to pay attention to all of those types of items. So it wasn't spelled out exactly as it is on the residential side. In the 2021, that has changed significantly now. Quite a few more buildings are actually required to do blower door testing on the commercial side. It includes R&I occupancies and then occupancies that are outside of the R&I, but they do have different metrics that they do have to meet, which again is that CFM per square foot metric that's utilized with that.
The only thing I'll add to that is the question comes up when you're dealing with multifamily, 3 stories or less when it deals with residential. Do we have to do each individual unit or can we do the whole building? And the code, even in the 21, still says the building or dwelling unit. So you have a choice. That will be changing in the 24. I can tell you that much. Okay, there will be changes when the 24 comes up. We're going through that right now. And commercially, especially in the 21, that depends on a certain size of the building. There's all kinds of different stuff that goes into it. So you might want to review that carefully to make sure that so it depends on your climate zone, depends on size of the building and what's your occupancy and what's going on. So, yeah.
Yeah, Cameron, that's a great question. And I think one of the other things to kind of keep in mind too for the 2021 is when they are talking about for that multifamily that falls under the commercial provisions, there is that kind of an exception, I guess you could say, or how you deal with projects or multifamily that may not pass. You know, if you're more than this, but less than this, you have to do these items to kind of mitigate some of that. And so there is kind of, it's nice in the 21, there is somewhat of a procedure to help assist you to kind of get through the process too.
Perfect. It does look like he had a follow-up question before I move over to Q&A. Are there currently raters in Colorado using large commercial scale blower doors?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know that Excel does have a list of raters, and so that may be included in that.
Great. So moving over to the Q&A box, we've got a few questions for you guys. Have home builders been reaching out to you to gain knowledge about the 2021 energy requirements? Hope has done a few trainings specifically for general contractors, but I'll let you specifically.
Yes, actually, there's one track builder in particular that has reached out to me personally about working with them and trying to get some of their plans where they are complying with the 2021. There's also been quite a few builders that are reaching out in trying to figure out how to rethink how to build, right? Because, you know, the 2021 is very different than what we've traditionally been doing for the last few cycles. So there's they're trying to figure it out. And I think, you know, quite a few of them are actually reaching out and trying to incorporate the new items within what they're doing. Now, not all of them, but there are a few.
Next one is from Reed. There seems to be quite a few opportunities for a disconnect between design to CO. One, designers only provide referenced home or proposed home. Both are right, question mark. What are the common errors or cheats made by designers?
That's a really good question. I don't know that it's necessarily designers that may be doing some cheats, and Gil looks like he's ready to explode with some thoughts on that. I think where there is some disconnect is sometimes when you are talking about what's been designed and what's on the plans and what gets done out in the field. And then if this is a performance house or an ERI house, you know, the rater comes out and looks at it. All they're doing is documenting what was installed and not necessarily, you know, writing up saying that doesn't pass inspection because it doesn't meet what's on the plans. They're just documenting what was actually installed. And I think that might be some of the disconnect that happens between design and CO. And I think that's probably something that really needs to get out there for the code officials to understand, unless there's some sort of MOU that's set up with a particular rating company where they're actually performing and they have, you know, the opportunity that they can write up, you know, an inspection or correction to that. All they're doing is documenting. Gil?
Well, my turn.
Yeah, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, so Reed, if they're dealing with a performance type application, or that's what they want to do for energy compliance, yeah, they need to give you both. The reference house, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, and the proposed, but that's just a plan review. That's just a plan review. And, you know, they don't, I'd like to call it just a mistake. They just overlook something. They're not trying to cheat too awful bad. But it's essentially, we're just making sure that the thermal envelope that they're providing is what they're showing on their plans, right? You're just comparing it, right? Am I doing an R20 walls, an R49 attic? You know, what am I doing? Where am I trying to do my quote trade-offs? Because essentially the performance path or the ERI path is kind of a trade-off. Not like your thermal envelope stuff, but it's trade-off. The other thing you've got to be aware of is that there's two entirely separate pieces of software that do this, meaning I don't want to see a HERS rating for an ERI or a performance. I don't care what the home energy rating is. Okay? What I want to see is the performance report and or the ERI report, and it'll say it right at the top of the page. They're two entirely different pieces, so you got to make sure you get the right one. Going on to number 2.
Yep. Number 2 is third-party raters provide too little info at thermal inspection. What's the minimum required?
Oh, and poor Robbie has desperately tried to get something in the code that gives code officials some direction, all right, as to what's the deal between the two, okay? Personally, I gave the raters the same authority as one of my field inspectors. If it isn't a grade 1 installation, as far as the insulation installation is concerned, and if the air barriers are not correct, they will fail. They will fail, okay? Because the way that the performance path is, or the way they are, is they just grade it. So for instance, grade 1 is the way insulation is supposed to be installed, right? That's the way the manufacturers want to see it. But they also have a grade 2 and a grade 3. And all they do is they just give you less points, right? It just nicks your score. Well, that's not what the code's after. We don't want, we don't need perfect compliance, but we don't want a grade 3 either that you can, sheathing between the fiberglass bats, right? That's like a grade 3. And so I think it's really up to the jurisdiction to say, this is what you need to do. And I did that with lots of different raters. Just you take them by the hand and say, this is our expectation. And it just got to a point for us where we ended up doing an installation inspection anyway, because we had far too many companies out there that we felt weren't up to snuff. So we did one too. But I think it's important that you make it clear of what's required and what you need to see. Just tell them what you want. You have every right to do that because you're the ones that got to approve them. It's just like a third party.
Good, thanks. Next, number 3 is at the certificate of occupancy. Should we be comparing the actual rating with the proposed?
If you're talking performance or ERI, you should be getting you have a report that's provided to you that's, per plans, what the design was, this is what it should be getting. And then you have a report that's supposed to be provided to you at CO that tells you this is what was installed and then this is where the house ultimately ends up. So you don't necessarily need like the before and after, but you do need that certificate or that report at CO that's going to give you the information. It was supposed to be an R21 in the walls and they only installed an R20. So it changes things a little bit, but it gives you what the end result of the house and how it should perform.
Right. Yeah, Hope's right. It might not be exactly what they expect. Things change in the field, just like everybody knows. But the bottom line is if they're doing energy cost or the performance path, it just needs to be, energy cost needs to be less, the same or less as compared to the reference house. And you'll see that on that final document. And ERI just needs to have an ERI score based on that table of the same or less.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Don't forget on the performance report for that annual energy cost, you don't look at the total number, you look at the subtotal number.
It generally says for, use for code compliance, something to that effect. Yeah. Very good.
Perfect. Next up is if you receive a res check and a manual JSD, JDS, is this all the reports needed for the performance path?
You got
it, Gail.
You got it, Gail.
Sorry. No, actually, that has absolutely nothing to do with the performance path, right? And so res check is fine, and it basically is just a trade-off, what we call the total UA path for the thermal envelope. That's it. That's all it does. Okay, which is fine. I mean that's part of it. Okay. Then manual JS and D is just the HVAC design piece of it. Now, what you need to do, though, of course, is that the construction plans and the res check and the thermal envelope components and shown in the heat gain and heat loss, manual J part of that, should be the same. Yeah, so R21 walls and 0.3 windows and that kind of stuff, right? I don't usually get too bent out of shape with the areas, the square footage areas, because we can all do the same takeoff and be different, right? I mean, I'm not losing any sleep over a few square feet. Generally, what we're looking for is, did you miss the second floor walls, right? And I've seen that in res checks and JS and Ds alike. Not very often, but it immediately. It's just like, well, you've only got 800 square feet exterior wall. That's a 2-story building. How's that work? Yeah, you start to get used to that stuff. But yeah, as far as the performance path, that's a completely different document. That's going to be much more intense than that. And again, JS and D you need to have with every house. Doesn't matter whether you're doing performance or prescriptive or UA or doing the res check. That comes, you get that with every house anyway.
And that comes out of the IRC. It's duplicated in the IECC, but
Right.
it's an IRC deal, and it's actually been in the code since when, 1992? Is that when we?
Well, yeah, back in the, but
Look
it's
back.
been in every IRC printed since the 2000s. So it's 22 years among friends. What the heck? It's fine. Hopefully that answered the question there for you, Pamela.
And don't forget too that, you know, a lot of times people think the person doing the manual J is trying to pull something over on them. But, you know, chances are what happened is, you know, the whoever's doing the energy part, the architect and whoever's doing the manual J, they got together at the very beginning and they said, here's what we're going to do. They did a manual J. And then we all know that construction never changes. The owner doesn't change their mind about a single thing. And so things change, but nobody ever talks to the manual J guy.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. The majority of them aren't trying to pull anything over on you.
That's right.
Point hope. All right. Other one. Yeah. So for a single family house, a builder who uses a performance-based approach for energy compliance, they want to have an AC as an option. The problem is that the report often uses the AC as required in evaluation. Is there a methodology that this can be accomplished?
Performance-based approach, you often want to have AC as an option. Problem is the word is required in the evaluation. Well, unless I'm mistaken, the only piece that has to deal with the AC is the cost of it, right? So that's fascinating. No, we'd have to talk to a rater on that one, because as far as the efficiency is concerned, it's going to be the same. So if you have a 13 SEER in the prescriptive house, you're going to have it, or the reference house, you're going to have it in the proposed house. You're not going to trade off efficiencies. It then depends on the cost to cool it. That's fascinating. I don't know that I've ever seen one where somebody says, I'm not going to be putting in air conditioning, and so don't put that in my performance evaluation. I don't know why you couldn't take it out, but I'm not familiar with the rating of that software. Yeah, that's a great, I don't know, Jose. That's a good question. And honestly, how do I want to put this? If this is a production builder, yeah, single family house builder and performance-based approach, yeah. If it's a onesie, if it's like a custom house, that'd be one thing, and it's not like the place won't ever have air conditioning, and I would be suspect, unless it's in a higher elevation, that they're not ever going to put air conditioning in, because that's exactly how you're going to design your HVAC system, right? That's going to have the highest airflow, typically, not always, but typically it's going to have the higher airflow. And that's what you're going to want to design it to anyway. So that's fascinating. I haven't come up to that, Hope. Have you ever? I've never had anybody ask that.
You know what? And I think how I would approach it is, if they're using it as an option, that would be the quote unquote worst case scenario. Like,
right.
We don't make them provide, all the reports for every potential orientation. I think it would fall under that for me, that you're going to include it whether you install it or not, because it is a potential option. And if we're looking at it as a master plan type situation, then that's how I would address it. If it, like you said, if it was a custom home, that would be a different story. And depending on where it was being built. But I think if it's a tract builder type situation with a master home, that's how I would look at it.
And that's what he says. It's typically a production builder. So I would agree with that.
Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next one is with regard to blower door testing. All I ever get is a piece of paper with a number on it. Am I supposed to get more?
Well, I don't know. I think I'd like have somebody's letterhead on it. It's coming from somebody other than just taking a piece of typing paper and writing a number on it. I would think it would be like any other report. It's going to have the rating company or the blower door company that did it. You know, whether it's a energy rater, and here's my documentation, and here's the test that it did, and here's the CFM that it did. I mean, it's more than just a number on a piece of paper. It should have enough information that when I go into it's always, what was the blower door test on that and who did it? Well, that paper should have it, I would think. Yeah, but I mean, you're right. Essentially, it's got their letterhead, it's just got a number on it, right? You're trusting that they actually did it, just like we trust lots of folks who do lots of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it where it's a single page, but it does have the information. And then I've seen where you get that large report of, 6, 7, 8 pages. And I suppose it also depends on the size of home too, what was going on, what's included with all of that, or multifamily. I usually see probably more than 5 pages worth, but.
Perfect, thank you. All right, next step. Are you aware of any large apartment complexes, 3 stories, with open-ended corridors that have been required to do blower door tests on every unit? If so, what was the cost per unit for the test?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. These days I couldn't answer that. I think there might be a scale of economy there a little bit. If you've got that many, they might start cutting you a deal. And it also depends on how they're testing them, right? If they're doing what they call the guarded test, meaning they're testing the unit itself, right? And then they're also doing a blower door in every unit that connects with that unit. And so what you can end up doing is now you're only testing the leakage to outside, which is just the one wall. So if it's a unit that's in the middle, right? In open corridors, you're only going to have 2 walls that are open to the outside. The other 2, the roof and the floor and the 2 sides, are going to be other apartment units. So it's either, you're running 1 blower door or you're running 4 or 5 at the same time. And that gets really, really costly. I can tell you that where it's going is that it's individual testing for the units that they're trying to get it to the point where we don't have to test every single unit, okay? So we test units that are alike, and you have a testing protocol. If the first one fails, then you got to do X number more and that kind of thing. And as Hope was saying earlier, it's based on the dwelling unit enclosure area. And that's the defined term that's in the code. And that's what she was relating to. So what's the square footage of the walls, right? Enclosing that particular unit. And it's a leakage per square foot rather than leakage for the volume. Because when you deal with volume, it gets to be very, very difficult on very, very small units. You have to have a very small hole. And the reasoning behind that isn't it just as important to seal off air sealing between the outside as it is between each unit? The story I tell is, why is it when the guy that's on the first floor on one end of the building, he's cooking liver Friday night because you're on the 3rd floor on the 3rd story on the other side? Well, it's because air is moving through the building, right? It's going between the units. And there's a lot of talk of health and safety type issues and things and COVID and stuff that's going around these days, and that's kind of what pushes it. So that's just where I'm just telling you the way it's going, just to let you know what's going to be out there. Right or wrong, good or bad, just saying. That's what's coming down the pipe. And other things. We could talk about other things that are coming down the pike. But it'll be fascinating when the commercial, so during the standards process, I don't care if you want to hear it or not, I'm going to talk about it because nobody's asking questions. I highly encourage everyone to look at the public piece. So we're just going to the first round, both commercially, Hope's on the commercial side, I'm on the residential side. There's going to be a public comment period when we're done with this very first round, okay? And the beauty of the standards process and this energy code development piece is that you can make a comment on any of the ones that have gone in, right? This is the quote code, right? The pre-code, I guess you want to call it. But you can make a comment on any other section, introduce a whole new section, go to a section that nobody even dealt with, right? Bring in a completely new thing that nobody's even considered, which is completely different than what we're seeing in the typical code development process, okay? So take a good look at that, and I think you will be somewhat taken aback by a lot of the stuff that you're going to start seeing. Some things there's some very good things, some very good clarification. Existing buildings, there's going to be different stuff in there, just to let you know. Anyway, we have another question.
We got a few questions. So Heather asked in the chat, what is the date of the public hearing?
Oh, we're supposed to be getting that out. Heather, that's a good question. We want to be finishing up in June, isn't it? June, we've got to be done.
June, we have to be done. Actually, right now, the commercial consensus committee's meeting, and we should be done by the end of today's meeting on the commercial side.
Oh, really? We're not that close. Sorry.
Yeah. There isn't just one hearing, Heather. It's a series of hearings. So instead of only having that short amount of time, there's a lot of time.
Yeah.
But the newly established monograph, which is of what it will be the latest draft of what will be in the 2024 will be out. They're hoping mid to end August, where people can start putting in public comments to it. And those will be due, I believe, October. I'm not sure when in October exactly, but we definitely need code officials to take a look at this and see it, because there's an awful lot of, really good-hearted people, but sometimes those really good-hearted people may not incorporate all of the codes where we incorporate all of the codes. So they might be missing certain pieces that need to be aware of. So it's great to get more code official eyes on it.
Perfect, thank you. All right, we got a question in the Q&A. For a commercial project abiding by the 2015 IECC, when you calculate the maximum vertical glazing area as either 30 or 40%, depending on exceptions, is this compared to the gross wall area of the building, not each wall individually?
Okay, I gotta pull it up and look at it.
Yeah, look at the it is the entire building is to the gross wall area. Yes.
Each individual.
Is that how it reads? I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it says.
I was reading the question.
Oh,
I had to read the question.
Yeah, I thought you were reading the stinking code. Jeez.
Oh,
I guess I should look at that.
I'll pull it up here. I had to read the.
Yeah, I'm reasonably
because I was
certain it's
reading it.
unlike. That's going to be in the fenestration table. That's where the footnote is. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's C402411.
Oh, I'm looking at the 22.
It just says of the gross above grade wall area.
Right. Yeah. So it's the entire building. So
Yeah.
you could have, one floor could be full of windows and, 100%. glazed. And then the rest of them, be at 10% each floor, and you'd still be fine. Yeah. So unlike some of the building code stuff where it talks about openings per floor or per story, energy code's not like that. It's the entire building. It's the entire building. Yeah, and once you get above 40%, you're doing performance in commercial. Yeah, the only other way around that is ComCheck. If you use ComCheck and you got really good glass, you can get above 40% because that goes away. Still have to meet solar heat gain coefficient. But building area, that area goes away when you're using ComCheck. The component performance alternative, I believe, is the section that the code says it is. Yes.
Yeah, 402.1.5.
Oh, did you? Yeah, see, that's bad. I don't. I'd have to look it up. I wouldn't know what it was.
Perfect. Heather asked if there was an announcement from Colorado Energy Office about the dates. I'm not sure if CEO put out an announcement, but I hope I did want to ask you if Heather was subscribed to the ICC newsletter or the Colorado chapter newsletter. Would they have announced it there?
And are we asking about the dates for the consensus meetings and subcommittee meetings? You actually, let me pull it up, but you can register on ICC's website to be a interested party. And then what they'll do is they send out notices of the dates. And then there's also, it's also listed on ICC's website. Let me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it now and see if I can post it in the links or post it.
Okay, well then I'll let you do that. If you go to ICC safe.org/energy, it'll take you there. Well, it won't take you exactly there, but.
I'll post the link that I've got in the chat here.
Perfect. While he's working on that, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. I do want to just mention, no question is a dumb question. So throw it out there. I think you could submit one anonymously too. So feel free to put those in. But in the meantime, while we wait for a few more questions to come in, hope I have a question for you.
Okay.
The commissioning, and if no cooling system is provided, is commissioning required? The statement where total mechanical equipment capacity is less than 480 kBTU/H and cooling capacity and 600 kBTU/H combined surface water heating and space heating capacity implies that both heating and cooling systems are installed. So is that commissioning required if no cooling system is provided in that case?
Okay, so what it is, if I understand it, is they're just asking if their heating were to exceed the amount that is listed within the code, but they're not installing cooling, are they still required to do commissioning? And the answer is yes. Where that exception comes into play is if both the heating and the cooling is less than what's listed in the exception, then you are exempt from the commissioning. If your heating is above the 600,000 and the cooling is above the 480,000, then if either one of them are, then you are required to do commissioning. So it's a the only time that you're exempt is if both of them are under those thresholds. The other I know I get often is this only for like fuel fired appliances and not electrical appliances? And electrical appliances are included with the commissioning requirement.
And I'll take that one step further.
Oh, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Just for fun. So Hope, would this apply to very large buildings with very large systems, or would this apply to a strip mall that happened to have 17 separate rooftop units that then added up to more than one of those thresholds? Would all 17 of those systems be required to be commissioned?
So are the 17 individual systems on one building, or?
Yes, one building, one strip mall building, but 17 individual units, but it's all on the same building, yes.
If we're talking about that it's all one building and it's kind of one system with those individual systems, then I would say yes, if they all add up to it. If it's one building and you have a tenant space that has this, and one tenant space that has this, and one tenant space that has this, and it's not being built all at the same time, then no, commissioning would not be required. What's your take on that, Gil?
The original intent is that if we had 17 individual tenants in the same building with 17 individual HVAC systems, and it was more than the totals, commissioning is required.
Well, there you
That
go.
was the original intent. Yeah.
But that was if they were all getting installed at the same time, correct?
Clearly we can't, right? Clearly we can't. And clearly we're only going to commission one at a time, right?
Yeah.
And so my advice to those, right? Because I can get pretty darn intense. And probably the single biggest thing is in Colorado with these smaller systems are, 5, 6, 7 tons, right? Max. I mean, they're just not that big. Is the economizer. And does the thermostat control it? Honestly, that's what when it comes right down to, it's probably the single biggest thing that gets missed. And that includes replacement ones. Replacement, you don't have to commission it, but gosh, is it there? Does it work? Sorry. Okay. It's just fun.
Ryan's asking, what did it have to do with coordination between spaces?
Well, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, you're going to have lots of, in the example that you're going to have lots of systems when you're dealing with commissioning that you may have empty spaces. I mean, it's just an empty space, right? And you're not going to be able to do that commissioning until it's there, until it's done. You're going to have plenty of times. And just understand that we never see the results of this commissioning stuff. It's just part of the plan, right? It just says in the plan, hey, within 30 days, after we give them the CO, after everything's done, make sure the owner's got that stuff, will you? That's what it says, okay? And that was a big debate when this first thing came in. Code officials just, are you kidding me? No. How many years is it going to take to get this done? No, we're not going to go down that road, which is what brought in the section that says, okay, you don't have to look at it. You can if you'd like, but you don't have to. So there's going to be plenty of pieces that you can't do it. It's like, well, it's middle of summer. How are we going to test the boiler and stuff? Well, not too easily. It's middle of winter. How are we going to start the air conditioner? Well, we can't really do that, can we? So there's going to be times when you just can't, and it's an ongoing piece. Our responsibility is to make sure that it's in the document saying that we promise we will do it.
This is one of those times that you get to raise your hand.
That's
on
right.
Facebook and say, I promise I will do it.
Oh, that's right. It's on the construction documents. And if there's anything, I mean, it's just like in any of us code officials, it was on the plan. You said you'd do it. It's 5 years later and you can't show me the document. What seems to be the problem? You just simply ask the question. You didn't do it. Sounds like you're going to do it now. It's really it's all it's there for.
Perfect. So we do have a question about the 2021 code books and if they're done making additional erratas to it.
Oh,
If you purchase those books now, or what do y'all think?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
they have
yeah.
the second edition out already. or are they on the 3rd?
Oh, my goodness sakes. I think
Um,
it's more than that right now, but it's just constant, right? So there's where I'm always buying the first edition. Let's just put it that way, right? And then I'm constantly checking the errata, you know.
But the digital codes do keep up with what the erratas are. So if you have the digital codes, they are pretty up to date. And like I said, I think they're on their 2nd or 3rd printing of it. So you should be fairly safe as long as you have the 2nd printing at least. That you're probably going to have small erratas here and there, I would say.
And the stuff that ICC's got online, that online version of the, the online codes that they've got, it's actually very nice. It actually works quite well. And the beauty of it is starting with the 18, and that'll be, or I don't know, 21, yeah, the 18 for sure. They have all the code changes right there. You can click right on the thing, right on a little button, and it'll say, "Oh, well, this is new, and here's the code change."
Or changes.
Or changes, and they actually even have the code amendments. Okay, I mean, as far code development pieces, they're going to say, "Oh, well, here's what somebody submitted." They've got those in there too. So, I mean, it's worth, I think, jurisdictions to get at least 1 or 2 seats for that, so that you can see it, that you can actually go in and see that stuff. It's I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, it's thousands, right? But it's worth it because that's where we go. I mean, if we can't remember everything that happens in code hearings and, the reason statements behind it and discussions, they'll have the video.
Oh,
Of the actual code change, right? For us geeks. Or I can go back to see what kind of an idiot comment did I make. Go relive the moment.
yeah. I can think of a code change that comes to mind.
Hey, stop, moving right along. Is there any other questions there, Erica?
I have a question if we don't have any more.
We did have one just
Okay.
for the same commercial new construction project on the 2015 IECC. When is the minimum roof reflectance required? Is this a mandatory requirement?
Are you talking about the solar rating index of the roof?
Yeah, I think that's what she's referring to.
That only comes into play if, depending on your climate zone, and the climate zones within Colorado are not required to have that solar rated index. But what I will say is there are some jurisdictions that have amended that and are including that as part of their requirements. I believe Denver's one. And so you'd have to take a look and see what they're specifically calling out, because I believe it's a little bit different than what is written within the IECC itself.
Yeah, I think it's just climate zones 1, 2, and 3, I think.
Perfect. Well, yeah, Hope, if you've got a question.
I have a question for everybody who's out there. Thumbs up if you have enjoyed being able to ask your questions and pick our brain, and you like the fact that you could get that almost instantaneous response to it. Looks like we've had a couple raise their hand real quick. What I'd like to say is you have the opportunity of being able to do that. So I really want to urge people to go into it's coloradocodes.happyfox.com, and it gives you the opportunity to ask all these questions. Any question. I mean, today was just on the IECC, but imagine if you could ask a question on any of the I codes and get this type of a response back to you. It's a great tool, and I cannot strongly urge you enough to utilize it. Pick our brains. I mean, it's great.
Yep, and I just posted the link in the chat. So looks like Catherine I'll respond to your question as well with that link. But if you guys have any questions at all, yeah, just submit it. And Hope, Gil, Shauna, Robbie, they're here as a resource and funded by the state and Excel Energy to do so. So use it, pick their brains.
Just not our noses.
Yep. Perfect. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now. Thank you all so much for attending today's session and asking some really great questions. And, keep an eye out for upcoming webinars that CEO hosts. I'll be sending out an email follow-up based on that, and I'll send out certificates in a week's time as well for this session. Otherwise, thanks Hope and Gil as well, and we will talk soon.